the side. The agenda was circulated. Are there any additions? Are there any deletions? Then would someone move is this a motion or an addition or a deletion?
I have one item of other business that I'd like to bring to
Okay.
committee's attention, please.
Under other business, we will put that item, and you will remind me in case I forget
Thank you.
and overlook it, which I'm apt to do. That having been said, would someone move the adoption of the agenda with the addition of Councillor Gatward? Take your pick, John and John. That'll cover it. All those in favor? Motion's carried. There is, as always, a provision for the declaration of pecuniary interest. And seeing none, we will move on to the delegations. We have two delegations and then a staff presentation. We'll deal with the delegations first. And I'd like to introduce, as she's coming forward, Kim Earls, who is the Executive Director of SCORE. And annually, SCORE makes a presentation to the member municipalities, and she is here to make a presentation to Brant County from SCORE. Kim Earls.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. Can everyone hear me okay now? Thank you for having me here this evening. We have our annual update, so I'll run through it pretty quickly. We are a regional economic development organization that was formed in 2010 with a vision for long-term commitment to prosperous communities within our region, and our vision and hopes for accomplishing that are through pooled resources and collaboration where that makes sense within our larger economic region. So we have three priorities within the region that have been identified, and that's infrastructure that fosters economic development, human capital to support economic development, and sector development with a focus on agriculture and food processing. And I'll just run through sort of each of those very quickly, sort of break down each of those priorities. So within infrastructure, some of the priority areas within that priority are transportation, housing, broadband, and business supports. And at any given time within our strategic planning process, we may take the lead on some of those particular issues, and then on some we may play more of a supportive role. So right now, we've been doing a lot of advocacy efforts and connecting communities in the transportation piece. So for you here in Brant, I know that you have a new service, and we've been working across the region to sort of look at, first of all, to create a larger transportational plan for southwestern Ontario that is southwestern Ontario focused, looking out, not sort of from the GTHA looking elsewhere. So that's sort of the main focus of the transportation piece, and within that is the community transportation. And what we've been working on within that is connecting the various transportation systems across the 5-county region. So some communities such as Norfolk, just south of you, have had a transportation system in place for a while. Some are a little newer, such as here in Brant County, and some in Elgin are non-existent, or in Middlesex and Oxford, they're just starting to sort of collaborate and pull those together. So what we're trying to do is really provide an opportunity for those operating systems and those staff to come together and work to create a sort of a seamless ridership for residents, and look at where there's gaps and opportunities, and be sure that we're collecting the same data so that you as elected officials can make informed decisions. Also within that transportation envelope are rail, and that covers passenger and freight. Right now our main focus has been on freight that serves short-line rail, so freight that's servicing our agricultural businesses and communities, as well as manufacturing. And of course, highways, ports, and air. And the highway portion, you here in Brant County are very well situated along the 400 series highway, but your neighbors to the south and to the southwest there's a little more need for some north-south connectivity within that highway system. So, and there's a map of the community transportation. So as a group, we collectively identified where there were community transportation systems in place and where there were gaps. And I am going to make a bit of a apology and notation on this map. Certainly Elgin County is not meant to be excluded. There should have been a further arrow sort of leading into that St. Thomas region. But as you can see, as a region, we're pretty well connected. There are a few gaps that need to be identified, and there's certainly some opportunity to leverage those systems. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what collectively we've been working on in here at Brant. Certainly your economic development team with Allison, Russell, and Sheena as the transportation coordinator have been a great collaborators in that. And then housing. So we've been connecting with employers in housing, and the housing sort of falls under the workforce piece as well. You know, there's opportunity to attract some workforce within the region, but again, the thing that we keep hearing time and time again at the county level and across the region and beyond really is where will they be housed when they get here? And again, that transportation piece, how are they able to get around? So we've been connecting with employers to see what their participation appetite is to be a part of that and providing opportunities for us to speak across the region. So, human capital, some of the things that we've been, and this is one of the areas where we've taken a more supportive role as of late. So we are a partner in the Local Jobs Hub, which is the Workforce Planning Board service area just to the west of us. So they cover Elgin, Middlesex, Oxford. And I'm actually meeting tomorrow with the Grand Erie Workforce Planning Board and the Elgin, Middlesex, Oxford Workforce Planning Board to see where we can collaborate, what sort of issues we can work on across the region to really leverage those dollars and those resources. So, and again, we've connected through Laurier, Western, University of Guelph, Fanshawe, the workforce planning boards, and again, we've tied all that into our advocacy efforts, which we'll talk a little bit about in a couple of slides. Human capital continued, so that's, again, recognizing, and this is not something new to anyone in this room, but recognizing the need for a continuum of education, skills training, and connection to industry to ensure that we have the right skills here for industry and businesses as they require across the region. Sector development. So this, I wanted to really include this. Some of you may remember the Food Hub project that we had several years ago, and I certainly want to mention that even though SCORE is no longer the administrator of that project, it is an ongoing project and continues. And some of the far-reaching ripple effects and unintended benefits of that are we now have 2 members of that committee that are on the National Food Policy Council and are reporting and sort of highlighting this area as an innovative area for agriculture and food. We continue to work with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and your Municipal Federation of Agriculture, and again supporting sort of those larger industry associations like the Ontario Hazelnut Association, Lavender Association, and the Ontario South Coast Wine and Growers Association. And another quick thing that I did want to mention is you do have access to industry reports through SCORE membership, for instance, Food and Beverage Ontario and some other industry associations. So please always remember that we're here as a resource as well. And advocacy. So I'll spend a little bit more time on this. We've continued to advocate for the region. Right now we have upcoming Roma delegation requests in. I believe last time when we went to AMO in the summer, we had 9 ministers that we met with, and recently, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, we met, as we do annually, with our 5 area MPPs, and then we'll meet again with our 5 area MPs. And Mr. Bouma was here, or was part of that group. And that gives us an opportunity to really get together as a 5-county region and really discuss specific details and specific examples with our regional MPPs to say, you know, what's happening, what's needed, and not only what our requests or our asks to them would be, but certainly to offer ourselves up as a conduit for them as well as they go forward in their jobs. What information are they looking for us to feed upward into them to help us do the best job they can to represent our region? Already we've received some feedback from various ministers' office, and actually as we were getting ready to put our delegation request forward, we've gained a really good reputation, I think, as a region that comes forward with solutions. We received an email from the Ministry of Environment, actually, asking us if we were going to put forward those delegation requests. So I think that really speaks to the job that our Board of Directors do on behalf of this region as they represent you all at various ministry meetings. So those are some of the efforts that are have been in the immediate past or in the upcoming immediate future. And then I want to take a few minutes to speak to the return on investment. So our overall partner budget is $103,000, and that's split right now among 4 counties in the municipality of Bayham. And what that supports is staff positions, so 1 full-time and 1 part-time staff person. It gives you an opportunity as a region to leverage those dollars. We've had some really successful projects in the past and hopefully move forward with some in the future. We have our ongoing resource planning and collaboration, such as the transportation piece that I mentioned. And it does open the door when speaking to other levels of government to, demonstrate that we do have that established relationship and how we're already utilizing the resources that we have. And the value of partnership. Again, we feel that this regional organization is sort of right-sized with the 5 counties being able to come to some consensus. We have a common makeup of our geographic communities, being small urban and rural communities for the most part. It allows us wider connections through various organizations such as Food and Beverage Ontario, with Federation of Canadian Municipalities and others. And it makes us part of a larger regional brand that's become very positively recognized. And we ask that you continue to participate in this 5-county regional partnership. You've been a valuable partner in the past. I think that we've demonstrated value over the course of the last 9, almost 10 years now that we've been in existence, and the partnership contribution has not changed in the last 6 years, I believe. So that's it for today. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Kim. Committee members, Kim has graciously volunteered to answer any questions that you may have about the presentation or perhaps SCORE itself, because it's not often that we get the executive director to come down before us. First John, and then Joan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. So just a quick question on the contributions. You said there's in essence 5 counties, right? So, and then you put in here that the overall annual partner contributions is $103,000. So that's only like $20,600 each, and the ask is $25,000. Do some pay more than others, or everybody's paying $25,000? I'm curious about that.
Absolutely, through the chair. Yes, so we are owned by the 5 counties of Brant, Elgin, Middlesex, Norfolk, and Oxford. For the past couple years, Elgin at the county level has not contributed as a full financial partner. However, some of the lower tier municipalities have. I don't want to jump the gun, I guess, but we do anticipate meeting with Elgin and presenting to them in the near future in hopes that they will be back as a full partner. And if that does happen, then our budget would be $125,000. So essentially the lower tiers that participate, the sort of pieces of the pie are divvied by numbers of lower tier municipalities within that upper county region.
Okay. Yeah, I've got no problem with the 25. I was just, the math didn't work. Thank you.
Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Kim. Thank you for the great presentation. It's always good to see what SCORE's doing. And on page 10 of the presentation, the sector development, Ontario Hazelnut Association. I'm glad they're organized. And do you know how many farms there are in our area that are now growing hazelnuts for Ferraro?
Wow, that's a great question, through the chair. I don't, actually, to be honest. I don't know right now. And the role that SCORE plays in that is, has been lately, more of an advocacy role in terms of I try and continually connect with various associations, and the Hazelnut Association being one, to say, you know, what do we need in terms of regional resources? So do we need more research? Can we help you identify that? I absolutely could find that out for you and send that information along at a later date, though, and would be happy to do that.
Sure, that would be great. I know they were doing a lot of research trying to determine different things and everything I've read, and I just didn't know how many farms were actually growing them and how successful it was, because apparently our soils here in Brant and Norfolk are conducive to that. And so I appreciate all the good work that SCORE does. Thank you.
Any final questions? Then let's deal with the presentation right now. Would someone move that the presentation, that Kim be thanked for the presentations and the information be received? Brian moves it, and Mayor Bailey seconds it. Any final questions? All those in favor? Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
And similarly, we have Carrie Sinkowski from the Community Legal Clinic to make a presentation to the committee.
Good evening, and thank you to Heather for being so friendly and resourceful leading up to tonight, and thank you, Chair, for the warm welcome. Thank you all for allowing me to speak with you tonight. I do not have a formal presentation. I am the community developer for the Community Legal Clinic, and I just wanted to share with you what our services are, because I think there's a lot of ways that our clinic can help you as an elected official service your constituents and support your constituents. So we are funded by Legal Aid Ontario, and we are based in Brantford in the Labour Centre, which is in the same building as the food bank and whatnot on Clarence Street. We've been there for probably around 25 to 27 years now, and we service the areas of Norfolk, Haldimand, Brant, and Six Nations of the Grand River, Mississaugas of the Credit, and then the city of Brantford. So our bricks and mortar are based in Brantford, but we provide satellite service to Haldimand through the Salvation Army in Dunnville, and in Norfolk through the Wellness Center. But we're only there, the Wellness Center in Simcoe, but we're only in each of those towns 1 day a week. We only have 5 staff lawyers, so we're pretty stretched in terms of being able to be everywhere, but we will do most of our work over the phone, which for folks who live in rural areas, such as you folks and myself, because I live in Norfolk County, we find that we're servicing our clients better through the phone, because then they don't have to worry about trying to find transportation to either Brantford or to Simcoe or to Dunnville. So that's something that I think is really helpful for you to know in terms of when you're giving a referral to us. So, one of the things that also could be helpful for you is on our website, we have a list of other areas of law. And when you click on one, it will take you to this other website that then has more information. So it's not legal advice, so it's not summary advice that you're giving anyone, it's legal information. So anyone can give legal information. When I used to work at the Sexual Assault Center, I was able to give legal information to people, because all you're saying is, if my client had an N4 from their landlord, that kind of form, I could tell my client what that form is. That's just legal information. Summary advice, legal advice would be if I then told my client, this is the strategy you should use, da 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 da. But there's nothing wrong, like liability-wise, with just legal information. And that site is really great. So now almost all the legal clinics in Ontario, which there's 72 of us, we're all linked to the same website now. So our homepage is localized. And actually, the only ask I have of you tonight is if any of you have pictures of Brant County that you'd like to be on our website. I live in Port Dover, so that's why there's a picture of Dover on here, because that's the only photo I had access to that wasn't a stock photo. But yeah, if any of you have photography as a passion and you have some pictures of iconic pictures of Brant County, we would like to put them on a scrolling thing so that we represent our whole area, not just where I live, because I'm clearly in charge of the website, so that's why this looks like this. So I am the community developer, which means, for those who don't know, is I go in the community and I provide learning opportunities for folks to develop their self-advocacy skills. I sit on committees. I offer presentations to agencies on various issues related to our clinic. And sometimes it will be helping out at things like Welcome Love last Wednesday. We were part of that. And I think those of you who were there that day, in particular, Councillor LaFerrier and Mayor Bailey, because I think it makes a huge difference having people present who aren't just directly impacted, but are impacted because it's their community and they care. And I think that the feedback I heard from folks was that they were really touched by the number of folks that came out and helped out that day in various ways. So that's sort of my job in a nutshell. It's much more expansive than that, much more broad. And I work in every area that we service. So last week I worked in Dunnville all day on Tuesday, and then I was in Brantford all day Wednesday. So I'm everywhere in the communities that we serve. And then the lawyers are just mostly in Brantford or Dunnville or Simcoe. So the areas of law that they practice in are primarily two. So income security law, which is Ontario Works and Ontario Disability, which is one way that we can definitely help you. So if you have folks calling you who are having issues with their ODSP appeal, we can represent people. We do have an income test, but the income cutoff for us is higher than Legal Aid Ontario for family or criminal law. So there are more folks we could help, or we can also offer summary advice to people. We don't necessarily need to represent them. And then the other area of law that we practice in is landlord-tenant. We do not represent landlords. We refer them to the Landlord Help Center in Toronto, but we can represent tenants at the landlord-tenant, or the LTB, the Landlord-Tenant Tribunal. Oh, what's it called? Oh my goodness. Yeah. Sorry. Or we can, again, offer summary advice. So people don't have to retain a lawyer in order to receive our services. It could just mean they have a meeting once with them. And so they say they had a meeting with Michael. They said, I got this form from my landlord. What does it mean? Michael, who's one of our staff lawyers, who goes to Dunnville, he explains what that form means and then sends you on your way. So especially for folks that are in arrears, sometimes what our lawyers will do so it doesn't go to the LTB is that they'll make a repayment plan with the landlord and the tenant, and then you don't have to go to that next step. Yes, so that's us, and please, if you ever have someone that you're working with and providing support to or advocacy to, you can also call us, and you can talk to one of the lawyers and provide that information to your constituent. So thank you, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Carrie, and I'm sure there's questions from the committee. We'll do it the same way. Any questions or comments to Carrie? Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Carrie, I'm just wondering if you could go through some specific types of referrals you get from municipal elected folks. I know I use your services, or I refer probably once every month or two, normally around poverty law, or if folks are having issues with OW, childcare, or their landlord's trying to kick them out and they need some services. And what are your cutoffs in terms of service? Like, is there a financial cutoff? Like, people have to make a certain amount?
Yes, all right. Yes. So we don't have so Legal Aid Ontario has an actual cutoff, and it's like a hard and fast one. Ours, we don't we don't advertise it because there's room in ours. So ours is higher, I can say that much to you. A lot of the calls we get from elected officials, both MPPs, MPs, and council members in all the areas that we service, a lot of them are around tenant rights and responsibilities. That's, I would say, is the majority of our calls, just anecdotally. I don't have any stats with me. I was a constituent assistant for Dave Levac, and I know when I worked for Dave that the majority of my calls to the legal clinic were about landlord-tenant issues. Sometimes there are ODSP appeals, but the majority, I would say, are tenancy issues. We also have elected officials calling us because they have someone that they think might benefit from community-based programming. So for my program, I do offer a self-advocacy program and a speaker school program, which is story writing, storytelling program. And I'm running it here in Paris this winter. And it's a 6-week program. It will be 6 Wednesday mornings in a row, starting the first week of February. And it's free. It'll be here at the library at this branch. And it's for anyone who's looking to strengthen those skills to be able to advocate for themselves, because one of the things that clinics are really interested in is social justice on a broad scope, not just the areas of law that we practice in. So sometimes we're getting referrals from elected officials or from social workers who are concerned about someone that they've been supporting or advocating for, and they think that they need to work on their skills to be able to do some advocacy for themselves.
Also, thank you for co-sponsoring that transgender author event that we had recently in this community.
Yes, thank you. That's another example. So I do event planning as well, and that was a great event, and I was really happy that Mark asked us to partner on that. I think it's really important. I've been working in Brantford since 2002, and I was formerly at the Sexual Assault Center before I worked for Dave Levac and before I came to the clinic. And for me, creating space to talk about issues that no one wants to talk about is really, really important, or issues that people are afraid or apprehensive or anxious to talk about. And I think that is an awesome example of an event where it's really important for community to come together and support folks. And I mean, with the Sexual Assault Center, we have Take Back the Night, and there's lots of opportunities in the communities that we're servicing in here in Brant County to create safer space. So thank you for inviting us. And as far as our hours go, we're open Monday 9 to 1, and then we're open Tuesday to Friday 9 to 5, but we have drop-in capacity. So there's always a lawyer on intake. So you never have to make an appointment. You can just call in. And same thing with you. Like, you could just drop in if you wanted, if you're in town, or you can just call in and talk directly to one of the lawyers. So if you identify as an elected official or a frontline worker, then you don't need to go through an intake process. And you can get information. You don't have to share anything identifying, and then you can share it with whoever you're supporting.
Any final questions? Carrie, thank you very much for the information. It's a service that we all need to understand and know more about. And I applaud you for coming and sharing your insights with us. That having been said, let's deal with that issue right now. Again, would someone move that Carrie be thanked for the presentation and that it be received? John Pierce moves it, seconded by Mark. All those in favor? That motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have an education session. Our General Manager of Public Works is going to, if he can make it here without stumbling,
Sitting too long.
do a little bit of information presenting on winter operations. Rob Walton.
Through the chair to the Corporate Development Committee. So tonight I'm going to give you the Coles Notes of winter maintenance. We could go on for hours on a subject like this, but after the first winter event that we had, there was a number of citizen inquiries, a number of councillor inquiries as to, citizen inquiries they had, how to respond to them. We thought we need to do a better job of doing this. So this is the start of this tonight by me getting up here, talking to council, talking to the people that are watching us on YouTube, and improving our website so we have a place to direct people to where most all of this information will be. So I'm going to try and do this in 5 or 6 minutes. Okay, so to start out, the county does have an approved winter operations plan. It's 9 pages long. This is just the start of it. This is on the website. It's all centered around minimum maintenance standards. Now, when we talk about minimum maintenance standards, which are based on your daily traffic, your speed, and your type of road, the standards to which we do winter maintenance is far higher than minimum maintenance standards. If we get into a lawsuit and the like over something that happens during a winter event, we rely on minimum maintenance standards as part of our defense, but we can generally show that we are much higher than that level of maintenance. So this is the map of the whole county, and we do have 2,237 lane kilometers of roads which need to be maintained. This map shows the classes of roads from 1 to 6. Now, we do not have any Class 1 roads, so they would be, Class 1 roads in this area would be our provincial highways. We do not have any Brant County roads which are Class 1. We did have some until the last change in the minimum maintenance standards, and those standards changed such that we did not have any anymore, even though we do have downloaded provincial highways within our jurisdiction. You can see on the map that the different colors indicate where what class each of the roads is. So, under minimum maintenance standards, snow accumulation, this is an example of the different, for the first 5 classes there, your response time required for a depth of snow. So you can see that for Class 5 roads, you would need 4 inches of snow, and then you would need to respond within 24 hours after that snow stopped falling. So generally, we are much better than that in our level of service, but when you get to complaints, this is how, the information that can be held out as to why our operations are the way that they are. Now, here's an interesting thing. Our equipment deployment here in Brant is very flexible in how we deal with storms. So our general normal operations are, our workers are there from 7 a.m. to 3:30. But depending on the event, we can expand those hours out. We can call some operators in early, so sometimes they're out there at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, starting out, getting going. And some of those operators can be held later in the day as well, after 3:30, generally through the supper hour when we have the peak commuting traffic. So in that period of time, Monday to Friday days, we'll call it, we have 23 tandem truck snow plows, 4 one-ton trucks, 4 tractors that have plows that operate in the urban areas, and we have 2 sidewalk plows. So at nights, our night shift starts, there's 4 operators that come in at 8 o'clock and work through till 6:30 in the morning. There's 3 more that come in at 10:30 and work through till 6. Now, those hours can be shifted some as well, and you can see how the flexibility of the system can run based on when people are called in. We are bound to deal with hours of operation though. So operators cannot, truck drivers in any industry cannot work more than 13 hours per day or a cumulative of 65 hours per week, and there is a minimum rest time they have to have between shifts as well. So this all factors into it when you're calling people in early or keeping them late. You have to make sure you meet all those things. You can't, the way our operation runs, you can't say definitively how many would be there at any one given time. It does, we flex it based on the storm, when it's happening, when we need to apply the material. Sidewalks, a big question there. In a major storm, those 2 plows that we have will take 48 hours or more to get around the roads. We only do a small percentage of the sidewalks under our program. The rest of them are required to be done by the residents. On the roads, we use brine, we use treated salt. Both of those are intended to reduce the amount of salt required for our operations, and we are using sand and salt mixtures as well. We make the use of external weather forecast service. We get 4 reports a day, and we plan our upcoming operations based on information that we get from them. One thing to look out for, and you'll see the website will put out notifications of this. So if we do have an approaching weather hazard, we can declare a significant weather event. And I think last year we only did declare 1 in the entire winter, but we have the ability to do that. In a significant weather event, once you've declared it, actually minimum maintenance standards does not apply anymore, and you can deploy resources as you see necessary to deal with the event. And then once you've declared that the event has ended, then you are required then to meet minimum maintenance standards again. In an event of a significant weather event, we would tell the public what we intended to do during that event. You can get events where it's not really safe for anybody to be on the road. And we would tell them if there's only going to be minimal operations, that was the case for this period of time when that was happening. Again, media releases are required to be posted when the significant weather event is declared and when it is canceled. And the weather hazard that would require that is determined by Environment Canada. And you'll all know it on your phones when you bring up whatever the weather service is. They'll have on there, usually it'll show it red on the top, and they'll say that Environment Canada is saying that there's some sort of weather event. We can use that as our key to declare that. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is just informing the residents. So we've actually set up a special page on the website that you can direct people to, and if you go to the home, and then you go to resident services, and you go to winter maintenance, all this information will be there. So that's the Coles Notes of winter maintenance. And I hope I'm within the time frame.
Well, you certainly are. Winter's not over yet, so you are actually just starting, I think. Any questions to Rob? I know we all get questions from ratepayers that their road is the last one being paved, and that there's black ice over there on the 13th concession, and everybody's over on the Paris Road, that kind of stuff. Any questions? Steve first, and then John.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Rob. My question is specific to the sidewalk clearing. Is it safe to say that we only do sidewalk clearing, you said, in certain areas, and that's typically tied to school routes? That's my first half of the question.
I wouldn't say necessarily. We do have dedicated roads, which we do, and we also do the frontage of our own properties. County properties, as we're the landowner of those, and we have to do those. Right. The way the routes are set up in Brant County are kind of interesting, because some of them are inherited by the area municipalities back from before amalgamation as well. So it isn't, I wouldn't say it's consistent as to how they're actually set up.
Okay, thank you. The second half of that question was I did have a specific question directed to me after that last storm about an area near the high school where it seemed like some of the sidewalk, was cleared for a while and then not cleared for a while and cleared for, like, it didn't seem consistent. And I just wondered, I know this is a very specific question, but is there any rationale for that?
So, not knowing the details of where that was, my guess is it's an area where we don't do the actual plowing, and then it's the residents who do it, so some had done it and some hadn't, would be my guess. Okay. If it's on one of our snowplow roads, that wouldn't make any sense, because there's no point in us lifting the blade and
That's
going
what
over.
I couldn't figure out
So
also,
they do the entire road and they go through. But where you have residents that do it, that is not an uncommon situation where, and it's a timing thing too. They don't all get done at the same time, so it isn't as though you're going to have a consistent clearing when that happens. So if you gave me more specifics, I could definitely lead you down the path to the correct answer.
I know where to find you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. And yeah, thank you very much for this, Rob. And it's going to be, because I'm sure we all get calls about plowing and stuff like that, so it's fantastic. It's going to be on the website. We can direct people there. Question I have, and it's to do with when we declare a significant, significant weather event. I know in some other municipalities and stuff like that, they can tie that into on-street parking. Is that something, do you know, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but would that be difficult to do? I'm trying to understand if it's a possibility that we're in a major weather event, could we tie that to, no overnight parking or that type of thing? Are we able to link the two is where I'm going?
Well, I'll start off this answer by saying something unrelated to the question. Operations would like to have no on-street parking during winter events. It would make life a lot easier for clearing of snow, for sure. I don't think there's a way in the significant weather events to actually do that. Now, we certainly make pleas as we're doing clearing events to have people remove their cars out of areas so that we can do a better job of removing the snow. And as you know, we've actually changed some of the regulations in some areas to not have the flip-flop of parking so that we can make operations better, and we'll see for this year as to how much better that makes the operations. I think that we did promise to be making a bigger review of the sidewalk maintenance, and we really didn't have enough time between last June when we did our report to council and this year to get things going for winter operations in 19 and 20. But before 20 and 21, we need to talk a little bit more about sidewalk operations and what improvements we see need to be made, and some other change we probably need to make to routes. And we can certainly bring your question into that, into the answer of that when we bring that report forward in the next, say, six months.
Okay. If I could follow up that, and one other one, if I could. So you talked about, Monday to Friday, 23 tandem trucks and snowplows. Are you able to give me a rough idea as to how many of those 23 would be in rural areas, and how many of them would be for, within Paris, within St. George, within Burford, that type of thing?
No, I really can't give you that answer. But the majority of those 23 are deployed in rural areas. Those tractors with the plows on them and the one-ton trucks, they are doing the urban areas and our parking lots and stuff like that. And then some of the tandems are also in the urban areas. I can't just remember what the breakdown between what our rural lane kilometers and our urban lane kilometers are. We certainly have a lot of rural lane kilometers, though.
Right. Okay, thank you.
John Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Rob. We talked before about how can we help the residents know exactly where things are in terms of road condition and when their road is likely to get ploughed. We have the technology, I think, now to almost real time show which roads are clear and which ones are going to be dealt with in the immediate future. Can you say more about that?
So the technology is available through the vehicle locators, or EVLs they call them, to actually show where the plows are and have been operating. The system we've got, we actually are needing to make some changes in some of the technology that we have, and as we go forward with that technology change, we'll certainly be looking at improvements to that system. One of the problems with the predictor of where we're going to be, though, is some of the flexibility on how we run our system, because we do adjust the system to attack the areas which are worse. We have a large county here, and sometimes the northwest is hit harder than the southeast or whatever. So we do adjust our operations as much as we can to hit the harder hit areas first. So that whole predicting where they're going to be is a very difficult thing, and we like the flexibility of being able to flex the operations to get the most bang for the buck for our residents.
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think residents would absolutely appreciate that. I think what they are missing is knowing it. If they know that the southwest is really being hit hard, and the north end of the county has got away relatively lightly, they won't make so much noise if they know that the efforts are being placed at where the need is greatest. So is there a way of just doing it at that level?
I think through the chair, I think through the significant weather events that we can do a better job of getting that information out as to where we're concentrating our resources. On the day-to-days, it's a challenge, and I think we have to think more about how we could actually do that. If we're going to get into I know there are municipalities where they, through Twitter and Facebook and whatever, they're continually updating that. I guess it's something that we could consider, but I'm not making any promises as I stand here.
Mayor Bailey?
When you bring the report forward on the sidewalk improvements, is that going to address the little valleys that you're going to start chiseling out when the snow gets plowed from the road and plowed from the sidewalk, and then it gets hard and people can't get over the mountain? And from where I sit in my office, I see older people. I've gone out and helped them many times where they can't get over that hard built-up snow, so they have to try to walk to a crosswalk or something. It's very dangerous, so if it's not going to be part of your report, maybe it could be, I don't know whose job that would be. Right now, it's sort of everybody tries to chisel it out themselves, but it was the biggest question posed to me last year in the winter. It's kind of dangerous.
Through the chair to the committee. This is a very difficult answer to this question, and you already answered part of it. I think that, and most of where we get these questions is from downtown areas, right? The downtown commercial districts. I think we really have to all work together on this. In some of these cases, I think some of the businesses need to do a little bit themselves to make sure that a little bit of that's chipped away. We generally don't go in and take the snow away until it accumulates to quite a mound. So that area is used for snow storage. It's really interesting when we get the concerns from residents, and they come forward and they plowed my driveway in. Well, actually, that is actually part of the road too, and that snow has to go off to the side, so it's not as though we can lift the plow and leave that area. You're plowing in everybody's driveway when you're doing this, and when you're in the downtown, you're pushing the majority of that snow off of the parking spaces. You're pushing it into that little mound that's there on the edge of the sidewalk. There's nothing else you can do. And when that gets high enough, we bring in resources to take that away. Taking away the small amounts is almost as much work as taking away the big amounts, and we are not resourced to do that at this time. So I think in the interim, until and that's very costly to add that in. Probably would need to use contractors or hire more staff to do it. I think in the interim, I think that, we need to have, just like we have in other things, neighbors help out neighbors in other cases. We have lots of people that can't do their snow clearing, and their neighbors do it for them. This is one where, some of the adjacent businesses need to think about themselves and do a little bit of this for themselves as well. But we can certainly talk about what would be required to do this when we come back.
I think with you just saying what you've said, I think what we could do too is we could have a brochure or a pamphlet or something go around to all the businesses, because they all do see it. And I mean, as you said, when it gets to be a certain height, you take it away, but it doesn't need to be much of a height before somebody that can't walk properly and they're on a walker or a cane. It doesn't need to be big enough to be taken away. It just needs to be big enough that they can't get over it. So maybe if we did a brochure or a pamphlet to all the businesses saying that this is the county's stance on it, that we should all sort of help before it becomes a problem, then at least people would do that, I think. I think everyone's waiting for it to be done, and it just never gets done. So if they know it's not going to get done, they'll do it themselves. So I think that's what we should do moving forward then.
I've got David, then Joe, and then Mark. So David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. I just want to piggyback on what the mayor said, because you did say about seniors and people that maybe with a walker, but there's we have this issue come up every year at accessibility. So what may not seem too high to, say, you or I, it's insurmountable to some of these people. So if we can make life easier for them, I'm all for it. Just a quick question on the minimum maintenance standard snow accumulation. If it's a class 5 highway and the depth is 9.5 centimeters of snow, does that mean it never has to get cleared under the MMS?
Yeah, there's no requirement to take it less than that. Now, obviously, we are much higher than the minimum
I
maintenance standards.
realize, but according to that, it doesn't have to be cleared at all?
No.
Okay, but because sometimes, I don't know about the rest, but I've gotten the odd call where it's 2 days later and they say, oh, our street hasn't been plowed, and I'm just wondering if that's, I guess that would happen the odd time?
Through the chair to council, or committee, we get these calls every now and then saying that my road hasn't been done at all. So we do have the GPS out there. We can tell when it was actually done. Usually that's not the case. Usually it has been done. Like when you have a 2 or 3 day blow, you can plow that road out and you can have the accumulation come back again in a couple of hours. People don't necessarily know you've been there. So there was one event, the event that already happened this year. We had one inquiry from road that they didn't like the way that we had done it. We had been on that road, and this was a class 5 road, I believe. We had been on that road 5 times in the period of time that they said that we had not been there.
like I say, yeah, I think, yeah, we've all gotten that call a few
Yeah,
times, so.
like minimum maintenance standards, if you live to minimum maintenance standards, it's not much of a standard.
I've got Joan next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Walton. We mentioned the sidewalk plows, but we also have contracted sidewalk plows, do we not, still? I know we did at one time,
Yes, that's correct. We do, I should have mentioned that. We do have contractors as well.
okay? And the 4 one-ton trucks are for the narrower streets,
That's correct, cul-de-sacs.
and they get called out to do narrow streets, perhaps in some of our villages where we have narrow, very narrow streets.
That's right.
And it's done on a priority basis, I would assume. Like, if one village is flat and the other one's hilly, you do the hilly one first. I guess that's a priority I'm thinking about. If the small truck is going out. Is that how it works, or?
Through the chair to the committee, no, not really. Like the time we set priorities is actually in the night. We concentrate on what we call the mains at night, so we're really on the main roads at night. We aren't doing any of the local streets or cul-de-sacs or the like. They are not getting attended to during the night on average. We're concentrating on what we call the mains at that time. When we get out and do the other roads, we're getting out to do all of them. The priority is set on the higher class roads, less priority on the others, but we don't prioritize one village over the other. They're all getting, they don't get done at the same time, but they all get done.
Right. Okay, thank you. And the last thing I wanted to mention was at one time we had an emergency snow route map, and there was no parking on the streets during a snow or storm event. Have you seen that map?
No, I haven't.
Because I can recall it from Public Works way back when Ms. Compo was the head of the department, and maybe that map was, I don't know what happened to it, but I remember it, so, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay, then I'm going to go to Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have 3 quick questions, and thank you so much for doing this. This is really helpful, and I know a lot of us came in last year and were bombarded at winter time and decided we didn't like being counselors for a month, but this is good to get this information. So my first question is, through you, Mr. Chair, in the report that's coming about walkability and snow removal from sidewalks, can you put in data in there like you've put in about the snow accumulation for traffic, like how we do prioritize what gets cleared? For example, I look at it, and I'm not an expert like you are, but I see the bridge on William Street, and I know it's one of the only ways into the downtown, and it's narrow, and there's lots of traffic, and would that have a higher priority based on traffic and what it goes to than another sidewalk that we do?
Through the chair to committee. So there is, like, I didn't get into the details, but the minimum maintenance standards apply to sidewalks too, so there is accumulation depths and the like that are put on that. We don't, so when you get into the requirement, the frequency requirement, yes, it's detailed in the minimum maintenance standards, and I didn't get into that in the presentation. Certainly not as familiar with it as I am with what goes on the roads. The standard applies even when the private citizens are supposed to do it as well. So I guess where we get back into is where we prioritize our operations and how we might change that when we bring back something to council to decide on. I think when we bring back another report on this, we will bring back a request for a higher standard in some areas.
Wonderful. And then my next 2 are somewhat together, but I know some municipalities, through you, Mr. Chair, use salt bins. I know we have some, but that's something that I wonder that we might want to enhance, put more money into for places where walkability complaints happen, folks slip, problem areas. And then also, I wanted to ask about Safe Streets, and now that's a new program. When we start putting in things like speed humps, how will that work with, road maintenance and plowing, and I know there can be some difficulties there. So I wonder if you could speak to those two things. Thank you.
So, under Brand Safe Streets, we will be bringing back traffic calming measures. We haven't decided what any of them are yet. Say right now that nobody in winter operations wants to see humps on streets, because it is problematic for the equipment. So I can say that. I'm not sure what, where that will all go. What was the other part of the question?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Salt bins, I know we have some,
Yeah.
but I'm wondering if we might want to enhance that, if that's something that we were looking at, so that folks can put salt down where they're walking and have a little safety, or
It's something we can look at.
Okay, committee, I believe that's all the people that had their hands up for questions, so at this time I would thank the general manager for his education, and I think it's something that we're all bombarded with through the winter months, and it seems to not be a problem in the summer, but hopefully this winter will be a good winter in terms of winter control. I read somewhere, it may have been in the literature, that the general manager presented, I don't know, and maybe, I may have dreamt this, I don't know, but if you put all the roads in Brant County back to back in a straight line and went to plow it, you would end up in Prince Edward Island. It's an amazing analogy. So my daughter just moved to Prince Edward Island, so thought I'd throw that in. Okay, that concludes the delegations, petitions, and presentations, and we'll move on to the adoptions of the minutes of the last meeting. Would someone move that the minutes be adopted? Moved by John, seconded by John. Are there errors or omissions or questions? John?
Mr. Chair, can we go back and receive Rob's report? How are we going to deal with that?
I was going to wait till winter was over, but if you want to do it now, we can do it now. So you'll move that it be received, and the mayor will second it. All in favor of that? Thanks, John. And now we'll go to the minutes that you moved and John seconded for adoption. Are there errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Business arising from the minutes, I believe this was an issue about false alarms, that additional information was requested before it was put to the committee, and now the information has been presented. Would someone move the recommendation as it's now standing? Moved by Brian, seconded by John. Are there any questions? All those in favor? Motion's carried unanimously. Consent items. There are consent items to be received and consent items to be approved. Are there any of the items to be approved wishing to be separated from the report? John?
Mr. Chair, if we could separate number 4.
7A4. Are there any other ones? Are there any items to be received that wish to be separated?
Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
John.
Did he say 7A4?
7A4 is removed.
Okay, that's the one I had marked too. Thank
Okay.
you.
So with regard to the other ones, would someone move that the consent items to be approved, and the consent items to be received? Mayor David, seconded by Brian. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And obviously that was with the exception of number 4. John, you wish to speak, and Joan, for that matter, wish to speak to number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just a question I have on this. So it makes a statement in there, if I could, Mr. Chair, it says, to purchase each of the above-mentioned modules the county staff wishes to utilize, the total cost would be approximately $11,000. Then it says, there's an opportunity, however, through the cooperative purchasing clause for the county to piggyback on the City of Hamilton's agreements to implement the vendor pay platform through eSolutions and receive the module at no cost. My question here is, obviously, if we can do that, that's a no-brainer, but is there any restrictions because we're piggybacking on Hamilton? Does it have to be on, I'm just curious, are there any, it almost seems too good to be true. Are there any catches with this?
The CAO was going to respond.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we don't believe there's any catches. It's just, it's an incentive that the company offers to get municipalities to convert to the vendor pay system, so.
Now, thank you for that. If I could, Mr. Chair, as a follow-up, does Hamilton have to agree for us to piggyback? Is there any benefit to them? Do they get a cheaper or whatever?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we're members of these cooperatives, and
Yep.
so all the members usually have the ability to piggyback onto the others that are members of the cooperative. So I don't believe there's any, I'm getting a nod. So yeah, this is we can do that. There's no further obligation for us other than to jump onto the tender. So.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for finding that.
Did you have something in addition, Joan?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So even though we're piggybacking, we'll have our own County of Brant site that is strictly for the County of Brant for this new vendor process, correct? And also, what about somebody, I had a question written down. Can bidders still use the current paper format, or if we adopt this, do they have to use the electronic format?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask Laurel Lynn Roche, she's our purchasing officer, to come forward and answer that. She has more information than I do.
The chair, through you. Yes, we will have our own site. It will not change, as well as the, I'm sorry, your question. Your second question?
Was to do with, can bidders still use the current paper format?
Yes, they will be. We will graduate it into everybody will be electronic.
So eventually they'll have to use the,
Eventually, yes.
but you'll give them so
There'll
long.
be plenty of warning. We're going to start with some of the larger ones that the vendors are used to using, and then we will go to the smaller ones.
So if it's some company that doesn't like computers, they're gonna have to get with the program or not bid.
The smaller ones, we've also, to this time, helped them, if they come into the office, get signed up for it.
Great, thank you very much, Carolyn.
And John has a final question.
If I could, just go up there, and it talks in the report about, with the electronic, then it's easier to get complete forms and stuff like that, which is fantastic, and I'm all for it going electronic. Now, is it the fact of, somebody sends it in and we can, immediately send it back and say, oh, you missed this, this, and this, or is it set up so there's mandatory fields that they have to put in?
The chair, through you. Yes, there are mandatory fields, and it will not let you go to the next level until you've completed the first part.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, questions have been answered. Would someone move the recommendation? Moved by John, seconded by John Pearson-Wheat. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, committee reports. There's a report from the Community Improvement Plan Committee with an accompanying recommendation. Would someone move that the report be received and the recommendation be adopted? Anybody feel comfortable with that? John McAlpine moves it. Do I have a seconder? Steve, are there any questions? All those in favor? Motion is carried. The next one is the Tourism Advisory Committee report. Same thing. Would someone move the report be received and the recommendation be adopted? Mark and John Pierce. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Staff reports. Corporate Services, the General Manager's update.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I thought I'd just give you a quick update on the long-term financial plan. So we are on about our third version of the plan right now. Staff has been meeting. We've been meeting with the CAO, the treasurer, the deputy treasurer. There's a lot of work going into this. It's a very substantive document, so we want to make sure that we bring you a good product. So our next steps really is we want to have a special meeting of council in January so that we can walk you through this document and so that you can get a good understanding of where we are and where we need to go.
That being the update, are there any questions? Seeing none, thanks. General Manager's update. He's looking like he doesn't have an update. Are there any questions? He's exhausted himself with winter control already, and he's done his 13 hours, I guess. So we'll let him rest for a day. Well, you would. Good. Perfect. I didn't want to call him after 13 hours, you see. Community and Protective Services. There's a recommendation there with regard to the Brant Railway Museum. Let's deal with that. Does someone feel comfortable removing that? Brian moves it, seconded by John Bell. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. General Manager's update. Cindy, she's shaking her head. She doesn't have an update. Too close to Christmas, I guess. Development Services. She's not here, so there's going to be no update. We'll wait for the new year for that one. Strategic Initiatives. There are there's just one recommendation. Someone feel comfortable moving that? Mark moves it, seconded by John Bell. Any questions there? John Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just a comment if I could. I think this is fantastic. There's been a lot of discussion in regards to BIA of late and the how can I word this, the knowledge we have of the day-to-day ongoings of the BIA, and I think this is a great idea to get somebody on the front lines. It's 15 hours a week, which I think is great, and I thank them for coming up with this recommendation because I think it's a great idea.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Allison isn't here, but Russell is. Any questions? Seeing none, thanks for attending anyway, Russell. I'll move on to the CAO. There's a recommendation there. I'm just going to kind of park that just for a minute because I think it's going to generate a great deal of discussion, obviously. And I'm going to go to number 2 before 1 with the committee's permission to deal with that recommendation first. So F2, would someone feel comfortable moving that with regard to the OPP contract? Mayor David, seconded by John Wheat. Are there any questions to Michael about that? John Pierce.
I just wanted to confirm because it says in here, Provincial Police Services Ontario for a 5-year term. I thought we had discussed a 3-year term.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, I reviewed the minutes from that discussion, and there was no direction on a 3-year term, from my recollection. I think the clerk confirmed that with me, so I defaulted to the 5-year term because that's what our current contract is. But if committee wishes to change that, now would be the time to do that. So,
and that would take an amendment to do that. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Michael. Can you help me understand how things will be different from what they were in the current contract? Because we had the report from yourself, we had a good debate in council about how we wanted to see enhanced services. It's not clear to me from what I've read that we're necessarily going to get anything different on January the 1st from what we had on December the 31st. And I draw attention to a statement that said the OPP shall provide adequate and effective services in accordance with the needs of the municipality. So we as a municipality are saying we need these enhanced services. My sense is we haven't made much progress in getting them yet. Maybe you can update us, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So enhanced services aren't included in this. This is strictly the renewal of the existing OPP contract, and it is as framed out in the contract. In terms of enhanced services, I've had 2 productive meetings with the detachment commander. It's a complex process. It's a fairly significant investment for the OPP to field enhanced services on a year-to-year basis. So over the next 2 months, we will be basically working out a business case that will have to come back to Police Services Board, Council, and then go to Aurelia headquarters for approval. Because the final approval for enhanced services is OPP headquarters. It's not the Police Services Board or Council. So the best I can offer, and as I indicated during the budget, is that I would think we could aspire to have enhanced services up and running by mid-year. But again, that is really at the discretion of the OPPs.
Yeah, so if I may, Mr. Chairman, the sort of bottom line is we're just going to keep doing what we've done before, but there is no effective change on as we enter into the new contract.
Steve?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to the CAO, specific to the question about the length of the term of the contract, just for clarification, if, regardless whether it's a 3-year term or a 5-year term, we do always have the opportunity for a 1-year exit, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that we can exit the contract with 12 months' notice 1 year.
Any other questions? Brian?
If you're open for a suggestion, I will make an amendment, ask for an amendment seeking a seconder for a 3-year contract, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded to amend the recommendation from 5-year to 3-year. Discussion on that. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be supporting the amendment. I don't think it, I think we already have an out clause. We're asking our staff to do more work in 3 years than 5. And I think it's needlessly poking. You know, folks who work at the OPP, they should have the opportunity to know that there's some stability there. But again, even then, that's not really, because we could leave after 12 months. We're just adding more work to the CAO to do all this again in 3 years, and we have a lot going on between now and then. So I won't be supporting it. I like the idea. I understand why, but I don't think it's going to practically do anything that we can't do anyway.
Speaking to the amendment, John?
I will support the amendment because I'm left with the uncomfortable feeling that we're entering into another contract without having made any progress, despite all the discussion we've had and the very informative report we got from staff. So that 3-year term, I would like to see that as we get towards the end of it, we actually see some change that we can recognise as to the benefit and addresses the enhanced services that we require. And if we can't get it at that point in time, to wait 5 years and then decide we've made the wrong decision, I feel really uncomfortable. So 3 years is a good compromise for me.
Speaking to the amendment, Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I support the CAO's 5-year suggestion. The reason being, if we have a 5-year contract, we have a 5-year contract with the items that are in place. In the report, it states that the Police Services Act is going to change, and there will be no more contracts. And we don't know yet when that will be implemented. So we may be better off having a contract than those who don't. I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not able to say, yes, we'll be better off, or no, we won't be. I just know that they're doing away with the contracts in the new legislation. So those are my comments, and that's why I agree with the 5-year term. And I think my other business may help with the speeding.
David, to the amendment?
I see Brantford's pricing's almost 8 times what we're paying for OPP. So if there's an amendment for a 10-year contract, I'll support that. But I won't support a 3-year. I'll go with the 5.
John?
I'm not supporting the amendment either. I'm very happy with a 5-year contract.
Any other comments to the amendment? I think you've already made a comment. I'm going to call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of 3 years? Opposed? The amendment fails. I'll call the question on the original motion. That being, as it's printed, 5 years. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried as presented. Okay, again, I'm going to park 5.1 and just ask if the CEO has an update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick things. Just noting on the Brant Community Health Hub, Ms. Hayward actually had a fairly significant meeting with the members of the Primacare Family Health Team, who will be our largest and most, I think, critical tenant of the Health Hub. And I think that was what I would call the final step in finalizing all the lingering design elements. And as well, we had a design charrette with Development Services staff last week to kind of sew up site plan issues. So with that, she will be proceeding to negotiate final leases with the partners in the Brant Community Health Hub, and then we will be going to tender. So that project is moving along right on schedule. I'll be meeting shortly with the representatives for the Children's Safety Village regarding Council's direction to explore the opportunity for them to move on to lands that we own in Canesville, and would hope to bring a report back on that in January. Physician recruitment is an initiative identified in the strategic plan, and I'm actually starting to scope out what that looks like for the county. And I have some calls over the next couple of weeks with some folks, including some of the doctors, as well as the city of Brantford, who have their own initiatives. So just to begin to frame out what that would look like. And I used to, when I was with the CEO for BME, used to update on some BME things, and I will continue to do that as I think things that I think council might like to know. But one thing that I think that's coming up is the BME board will be meeting in January to review a new strategic plan, an updated strategic plan for BME. So their strategic plan is, I think, a little over 3 years old right now, and it's due for its update. So I think that continues to show that the board is proactive to make sure the company's going in the right direction. So I report, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions, CEO? David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Michael. Just to be clear, you're in charge of our legal department, yes?
Yes.
So I think you're the one I talked to. And I apologize for springing this on you. But we were talking about maybe revisiting the smoking bylaw in light of cannabis and all that. Is that something that's still going forward?
Through Mr. Chair, we actually have a draft, and we can bring it forward. I think the previous director had completed a draft. I think we still had a little bit of work to do on it. But I think one thing is we were kind of waiting to see what the level of complaints were, and I saw some information. We've had no complaints since the legalization of cannabis. So we can bring that bylaw forward in the new year. I think that was our plan. But we did want to have about a year of information regarding complaints to see whether there is a need to do a fairly significant overhaul to that bylaw.
Okay, and then one other thing, Lynn Dale had done a report for us early in 2019. We talked about, the odors coming from some of these cannabis producers, one in particular. And there was going to be a follow-up report to that, and nothing's come forward. I'm just wondering if that's something that might be coming forward, or is that something we turn over to the assistant to the solicitor, or where that might be?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can look into that and determine. I haven't heard too many complaints recently, so I think we may be just waiting and seeing. I know that there were several letters that went to various provincial and federal agencies. We also had a meeting with the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Agriculture. So, but we will bring that up at the senior management team and determine what the course on that is.
Okay. I think Mr. Bergeron has a couple complaints, but we'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you.
Anything else to the CEO at this time? Then, seeing none, let's revert back to F1, which is the report on the council standing committee structure. I may have overestimated this, but I think this will generate a lot of discussion. So I wanted to kind of do things a little bit different. Normally what I would do, I would ask someone to move the recommendation, put it on the floor for discussion. But due to the scope and magnitude of this, what I would like to do with the committee's permission is ask the clerk and the CEO to present the report, and if there are any questions to the report prior to putting the recommendation forward. And I think it would be a little bit more conducive to discussion, because I think this is a fairly important item. So I don't know who wants to start, either the clerk or the CAO, but what I would like to do is just give a presentation. Hopefully, we've all read the report, and then I'll try and referee a question discussion first. If you would work with me on this, hold your comments and your discussions to the end until everybody understands what is being presented. So first, questions of clarification, and then we'll get into a debate. And at that point, there may be some suggestions, and I'll entertain a motion somewhere down the line. So, who's going to do the honors?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll give a first crack at it, and then perhaps the clerk may want to add some further thoughts. Our report this evening was requested, and I think it came up a few times, including during my development review back in June. Council did receive, or committee did receive a report in January that provided quite a bit of context to your committee structure. It confirmed a few things, and just from memory, it confirmed that the County of Brant spends quite a bit of time in meetings compared to your municipal counterparts in the area, and that we do have a fairly long-standing standing committee structure. It's been in place for quite a while. We're one of the few municipalities, certainly in our peer group, that still utilizes a standing committee structure as opposed to what I would call a committee of the whole structure. The difference being is the committee of the whole structure uses committees where all members of council sit on those committees, as opposed to this structure we use where we have a bit of a hybrid between a committee of the whole and then standing committees with partial representation. I won't get into the details of the background to the report, noting that the current committee structure is laid out and it's been well discussed, I think, in previous reports. The clerk has provided, and the senior management team has reviewed, an alternative committee structure. We've proposed to have basically 4 standing committees. Maybe the default standing committee being the Paramedic Services Committee, which is captured in a separate report between the city and the county, and we haven't proposed any changes to that, noting that report, or that agreement between the city and the county was approved recently. We would propose to have a Planning Advisory Committee, which would deal strictly with Planning Act applications. It would not be dealing with any planning or development services related policy. We would propose to have an Administrative and Operations Committee, which would be a committee of the whole. We've proposed that it would meet during the daytime, and it would deal with what I would call the routine business of the municipality: approval of tenders, maybe the approval of minor policies, reports on what we would call an operational or routine nature. A lot of the reports that you would currently see on consent agendas or on the Community Services and Public Works Committee would fall into this what I would call routine day-to-day focus committee. And then we would have a Policy Development and Strategic Direction Committee, which we would propose to deal with the larger things. And some recent reports that would come to mind would be the report that I authored regarding police options, the report last month on the Brant Community Health Hub, things of a strategic nature, things that are of an evolutionary nature in the community, things that we feel that the staff level feel that the community would be of heightened interest. Obviously, major policy initiatives, things like the development charge background study, for example. So this would be areas of larger business. This would be an evening meeting, and it would also be a committee of the whole. I think the clerk has laid out some strong justifications for this. She's laid out basically a list of areas where these different committees would be dealing with. And she's also provided a few metrics on the number of recommendations and the time per recommendation, noting that we do believe that there is some gains to be had for council in terms of how it uses its time efficiently. I would note that we are not proposing a change in what I would call the committee cycle. So we have a committee cycle. We have a suite of committees that report and make recommendations into council. Council serves as an opportunity to appeal, or an appeal opportunity for those committee decisions. And we're proposing to continue that. We believe that's good democracy. So, finally, we do note that as part of this, we would also propose to bring back a delegation of authority bylaw at a later time. We want to see if council's interested in this, and then we would propose to seek some increased delegated authority to staff. This has come up as well, and it did also come up during my performance review about the need to reduce the amount of business that council is dealing with, to keep council focused at a strategic level. Given the size of the organization, we don't have a very robust delegated authority approach here at the county, and that could be approved to make us more consistent with our neighbors. Mr. Chair, I think the last thing I would note is that the clerk, I think quite wisely, provided some sample agendas on what these two committees would look like based on the last committee cycle, to give council a flavor of how, or committee a flavor of how this new committee structure would function given the business that you've just dealt with, which I thought that certainly helped from my perspective, and I hope for yours as well, on what type of business would be going to these committees. So, Mr. Chair, I will leave that as my comments, and unless the clerk has any further comments, of course, we're both here for questions. So, thank you.
And the clerk is busy keeping minutes as well, so that's why I appreciate the CAO for helping to present her report. And again, first of all, let's see if there are any questions to develop an understanding of the report before we get into the opinions and the debate. So first of all, are there any questions that we need to understand about the report directed through me to the CAO? It's always a good sign if there are no questions. That means everybody understands it, and I think the clerk can take credit for making a comprehensive report that is fairly understandable. John.
One simple question. It's on the bottom of page 140. It's on recommended administrative changes. The general managers will attend meetings, and I think, Michael, you're suggesting that if we want updates, we ask you to provide them. Is that purely for communication in regard of committee and council agendas? I hope you're not suggesting we can't speak directly to your general managers on a one-to-one basis about issues that arise between meetings.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I've always encouraged and council to reach out to the general managers. They are your conduits into the organization, and I would not hesitate that we're not continued support of that. My approach is that the general managers updates, I think it's always been my feeling that if it's important, it should be in the form of a report. And then, sometimes we will look for little update things. We propose to phase that out of the committee structure, and if we have information for you, to provide it in the report. And then if council wants specific information discussed, you would approach us, and we would make sure that the right people, a general manager or possibly someone else here, to deliver that information to committee at the time.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at the items in each of the proposed committees, and I'm just wondering, I don't see specifically accessibility there, but I would guess that it would be Administration Operations Committee, but I just want that clarified. Thank you.
Through the chair, the items listed are more of a guideline. There will be some items that will have a very significant impact that will be directed towards the policy group, and then items of a more routine nature would be directed towards the administration group. So in terms of accessibility, I mean, they may have some items at either table. The committee itself would report to the administration group.
Any other questions? Joan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noted that the Agriculture Advisory Committee is going to stay and report with the Planning Committee, and we had done that because planning needs citizens, and those are our citizens that give advice to our Planning Committee. I note that the Economic Development Department is listed under the Policy Development and Strategic Direction Committee. So I guess I need clarification. The Advisory Committee for Economic Development and Tourism also are being placed under a different committee's purview or umbrella, the Administration and Operations Committee. Those two committees are to advise and work with staff in economic development, in my mind. So I guess I'm wondering why they're not placed in policy and development and strategic directions. I guess I need clarification on that.
So the proposal is that all the advisory committees, except for agricultural, which has its own circumstances, will report to administration operations. It doesn't mean that those committees may not at some point inform the process for some of the policy discussions, but that's where their minutes would flow through. It's more thinking in terms of project and topic related rather than specific, this department reports to this committee. It's kind of about the scope and the nature of what's being discussed. But it is recommended that all the committee minutes would flow through the administration.
Okay, any more questions before I open it up? Go ahead, John.
Sort of along, maybe this should be for the next section, but along the lines of what Joan was saying, with the Heritage Advisory Committee, okay, it's a requirement of the Planning Act, and that's my understanding is why it was set up, and that's why I was thinking it should be reporting to the Planning Advisory Committee. Now, it has other rules as well, but I was just wondering if that...
Do you wish to comment on that? The statutory responsibilities of the Heritage Committee as it relates to planning issues.
So currently, the Heritage Committee unfortunately meets right after planning anyway, so their issue is a bit different. But so when Heritage Committee makes a recommendation on a planning application, it is generally at the Planning Committee just received that that's done, but the recommendation from the Heritage Committee becomes part of the staff report on that application. So regardless of what Heritage Committee reports to, those comments from the Heritage Committee become part of the staff report on the planning matter.
Okay. Okay, I think the questions are there. I think we're just at the point now where we want to either endorse this or amend it or discuss it, put it that way. Who wants to, maybe there's someone that's willing to make the recommendation and we can go from there. Is that what you wish to do? Mark is moving the recommendation. John is seconding it, so it's on the floor as it stands. So Mark, since you moved it, you get the first opportunity to speak to it.
Oh, thank you. To you, Mr. Chair, through you. I like this. I think this streamlines things quite a bit. I think it looks at a number of issues that we've had. I think Michael brought this up when he was talking about when we did the comparative analysis. We spend more time in meetings than I think it was every municipality that's in our comparator group, and a bunch that have higher populations than us and the rest of it. And that's not a bad thing, but we also have a lot of committees, and this allows for more of that and more being in the community. I also think it'll help with some of our staffers who we asked to come out at various times. I like the stability of this. Really, we go from, we've had consistent issues in terms of, we saw some just last week, in terms of not having every council member at social services and not having every council member at Public Works. Councillor Chambers brought up some really good points about Public Works the other day. We've had the same thing happen, though he doesn't sit on the committee, and it had to come to council, and these things are bumpy and needlessly so. I'm fully supportive of this. And I hope in the future we'll also be supportive of the delegated authority piece as well, but I like that there's going to be a separate piece to that, so I'm fully in support.
Steve and then John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'm in support of this also. My only comment is about the Tuesday question. Within this, it said there's been some suggestion that setting all the meetings to the same day of the week, Tuesdays, would further enhance consistency and minimize conflicts with statutory holidays. And I think there's something to be said for saying Tuesday's the big day, 4 weeks out of the month. I like the consistency of that. It might help all of us. There's a reference in here, there may be some issues with some external agencies, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant and how serious that was, but I guess my only real comment is I'd be up for saying let's make them all Tuesdays. And like Mark said, I agree with the delegation of authority. The sooner we can bring that along, the better. Thank you.
John Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and it took me a couple times to read through it to fully understand it here, but I agree. I think this is going to go a long way of streamlining things and making the entire council aware of everything that's going on at all the meetings, which is good. As far as to what Councillor House was just talking there in regards to, setting the dates on the Tuesdays, and I think that's a great idea. Moving the meetings back to 6 o'clock, I think, is a fabulous idea. That way, if we do get into lengthy meetings, it's not 11:30 at night when we're getting ourselves out of here, so I think that's a great idea. Now, I'm throwing this out there. We're consistency here on the Tuesdays and moving them back to 6 o'clock. What would we think about having them all, like even the one that's talked about on the third Monday? What if we were to, I guess the third Tuesday is council, so we wouldn't be able to do that particular one, but what if we had them all at 6 o'clock? Just throwing that out there.
Okay, we'll make a note of that throw-out and probably come back to it.
Tossing agenda.
Okay, Mayor David.
And that was my suggestion too, is that we have them all earlier at 6 o'clock. I was speaking to a couple of other councillors, and I hope it doesn't become like speed dating. I hope because there's such a busy agenda, we aren't rushing through everything and sort of rubber stamping everything just to get out of here by 8:45. So I'm proposing that we do the 6 o'clock for all of them, and that we give everything the time it needs. And if it's 5 hours, it's 5 hours, and if it's 3 hours, it's 3 hours. But we can't be doing sort of the rubber stamping of things just because it's a heavier agenda. So that's my fear. And speaking to a couple of other councillors, I think that's their fear too, is that we're going to start rubber stamping things.
What I'll do is I'll kind of make a note of that, and that can be added if it need be, if there's a consensus, and I'll ask for consensus. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fully supportive of this. Been waiting for this for a long time. Of some sort, I do have a problem with the 1:30 meetings. I've said before, it's the wrong time of day for some of us, and I'd rather have them all at 6, and then we're consistent with that. Anybody asks when our meetings are 6 o'clock, you don't have to remember what some are, and it works better, I think, to me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments? Joan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I like the idea of committee of the whole for the Public Works, Community Services, and Corporate Services, which have been rolled in on page 136 to the Administration and Operations Committee. However, if we start that meeting at 6 o'clock at night, and we have basically the material to cover from those 3 committees, I'm not sure what time we'll get out of here. If the idea is to streamline things, the work of those 3 committees is important, and I still expect that we should have discussion on various reports like we do now at the committee meetings. I'm not sure how long community services lasts. Public Works can go anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. And Corporate Development Committee tonight has already gone almost 2 hours. So we could have a 5-hour meeting, and it's going to start at 6 o'clock. We'll be here till 11 or later. So I like the 1:30 time better. I know that's not good for people in the daytime that have other jobs, but the only other solution would be to split the Administration and an Operations Committee and have 2 meetings so that they're not, you don't have one 5 or 6 hour meeting, you split it up. The other thing that wasn't mentioned is that the building department is being moved into Administration and Operations Committee. And the building department works closely with Planning Committee. Any building application that comes forward usually has to go to zoning to make sure that the setbacks are correct and that the property is zoned correctly for the use that's being proposed for a new building. So I'm not sure why we're going to move building over, away from planning. Planning isn't that heavy, and I thought from the report we wanted to have balance, appropriate balance of business at each standing committee. So that would be my suggestion, is to amend and remove building from Administration and Operations over to planning. Also, I would suggest that we amend the report and put those 3 advisory committees that were mentioned, economic development, tourism, to the administration, or to the policy and development strategic direction committee, because that's where economic development is listed. And Councillor McAlpine brought up about the Heritage Committee. I think that those advisory meetings should be referred to planning as they currently are, and not to some other committee. It just seems to me like we're muddling things by changing the advisory committee and who they report to. So those are my comments, and when you're ready for amendments, I'd be pleased to make 1 or 2, or
Okay.
however you want to do it.
I will get to that, and your comments have been noted. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to say I support delegation of authority. I think that if we can give our staff more to do, more decisions to make, and I think, if the delegation of authority policy hasn't been looked at for many years, I'm sure we can move some of the decisions that we currently have on our plate to the county staff with complete confidence, and I hope that will happen. I applaud the change of committees. I'm actually probably on my own on this one, but I think we should take the opportunity to make more efficient use of the fact we have 2 councillors per ward, and maybe it will address some of the issues that Brian has about timing. I have complete confidence in John Pierce that if I'm not at a meeting, he will comfortably and correctly represent the views of Ward 3. If we compare ourselves with neighbouring counties, just take Brantford, for example. There are 10 councillors there representing 100,000 people. So that's 1 councillor for every 10,000 people. Right now we have 1 councillor for 3,500 people. Now, you could say that's a luxury, and it is in many respects. We have the opportunity to spend more time talking to people. But if we're looking at efficiencies, then my proposal would be that everybody attends the council meeting, everybody attends the policy development section, but we split our resources between the other 2 meetings. So 1 member of each ward attends one of each of the other 2 meetings, and we flip them round mid-term so that we do get that exposure. So I have one more thought. And it really is just why do we suggest having meetings not in the evening? And it was to try and help our staff who are, if they have to spend 4 nights a week, 4 nights a month here, between 6 and goodness knows when, having a couple of meetings in the afternoon would make life a little more tolerable for them. And I think we shouldn't forget that. Thank you.
Any other comments by anyone who hasn't spoken the first time? John?
I seconded the motion as it stands, and I don't see any need to make any changes. We asked staff to come forward with a recommendation. They did, let's give it a go, see how it works.
Okay, anyone else has not spoken? I will make some comments as well. I don't usually do that as chair, but I do support the thrust of the initiative to change the operating mechanism that we use. I will say that as time goes on, municipal councils need to focus more on policy development and strategic direction, and I think that is a key committee, and I think that is where the fun is, and that is where we should be going. I started many years ago, and we used to debate, believe it or not, the cost of French fries in the concession stand at the arena. We have migrated way away from that. We were very fiscally prudent back in the day, but policy and direction, strategic direction and policy are where municipal councils need to be in modern day municipal government, and that is key. So I do support that, and I support the fact that all members of the council are on all committees. I think that is, and this is contrary to what Jonathan, but I believe that everyone has the right to express an opinion at every meeting, and whether you're a ward councillor, David and I don't agree on a lot of things, and maybe if he's there and I'm not, I don't get it. So I like the idea, and I think that is one of the reasons for this, is to have everyone have a say on everything in terms of collegial participation. I'll go one step further and suggest that the chair and vice chair of these committees should be a one-year appointment and progress through the council or the committee members, because I think everyone has a right to chair a meeting, and everyone should chair a meeting. And if we make it so that it's not a lifetime appointment to be chair of the policy, I think it's important that it be a one-term. So I think that should be added in the bylaw. So the motion has been moved and seconded as such. We've had some suggestions. Rather than amendments at this point, I'm just going to see consensus-wise. We had a suggestion that all meetings be at 6 o'clock. Is that the consensus? Okay, that may take an amendment because there's a division on that, so that there may be an amendment deviating from the recommendation if that be the case. We had the suggestion of John about splitting the committees, and Joan actually suggested that as well, that we have two committees instead of one, administration operations, I believe. Is that the consensus? Or are we satisfied with one committee that may take 5 hours, as Joan suggests? John? I understand. Is that, I express my opposing views on that everybody should take part. If there's a consensus to split the resources, anybody agree with John on that? Okay, and again, the consensus would be that that not be the case.
That's if we start at 6 o'clock only.
Okay. And then we had the suggestion that the advisory committees report different than what the recommendation suggests here. Is there support for that?
For the advisory committees changing to meet their departments.
Okay. I don't see a lot of support for that, but I will take an amendment if that be the case. So, you see the recommendation as it exists. We've seen some consensus, but if anyone wishes to make an amendment, now is the time. If you wish to state an amendment, a seconder, and then we'll vote to change the recommendation. Brian?
I will move for 6 o'clock meetings, all meetings starting at 6.
Do I have a seconder for that? John, that the meetings be convened at 6 o'clock. on these standing committees. And we're not talking about the paramedic services. On that. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of that? Opposed? Okay, that motion carries, and we will leave that. That can be in an amendment to the report, to the recommendation. And again, that can be changed or depending on the flexibility. Are there any other amendments? Joe?
I would move that Economic Development and Tourism Advisory Committees be, report to the Policy Development and Strategic Direction Committee where the economic development is listed. It's on page 135. I would also move that the Heritage Advisory Committee
This is all going
report
to
to
be one.
planning.
This is all going to be one amendment.
Pardon?
This is all going to be included in one amendment.
Oh, this is all to do with advisory committees.
Correct. But I just want to make sure you know that this is one amendment.
Yeah, it's all one amendment. Now, if somebody wants to split it, they can, but, and that the Heritage Committee report to planning. And then I have another amendment that's not to
Let's
do
deal
with
this one. Let's
advisory.
see if you get a seconder for your first amendment, which
Okay.
contains 2 clauses.
Okay.
Seconded by John Bell. Discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that amendment fails. You have another amendment?
Yes, I would move that the building department be left with the planning advisory committee. That's where we get building reports, activity from, they're connected with planning, and I think it makes good sense to leave them with planning. So
Do I have
I'll
a
make that amendment, that building be moved with the planning committee.
That the building department responsibilities be conducted at the planning committee.
Yes.
Do I have a seconder? Mayor Bailey. Discussion on that. All those in favor of that? Opposed? I believe that
It
one
was
carries.
5-5. Oh, it's carried?
I think it carried 6-4. Sorry? Yes.
I'm just wondering, when you were looking at 2 things, at consensus, you didn't ask about the pieces you had brought up. You asked about what everybody else had brought up. And I'm wondering
Okay,
if there was...
see, I can't make a motion. My next phrase was going to be, would anyone care to make a motion about the chairmanship rotating through the committee?
I also had one other question that didn't get, we just went very fast. On the 6 o'clock, we didn't change the date, though. In the discussion, we talked about Tuesdays, but we were looking at, what we passed in the amendment was 6 p.m. on Mondays for the 2 and 6 p.m. on Tuesdays for the other 2?
That's my understanding of the amendment, that the times be at 6 o'clock rather than the one committee start at 1:30.
Just wanted to understand. Thank you.
Steve?
I would like to move that we change the Monday to a Tuesday, so that it's always Tuesdays. 6 o'clock Tuesday, all your, 4 Tuesdays a month.
Then let's see if I get a seconder for that the Monday, proposed meeting on Monday be scheduled for Tuesday at 6 o'clock.
Mr. Chair, we're not going to be able to do that for the 3rd Monday per se, because that would make it the 3rd Tuesday, which is council, so that's not going to work. Council's on the 4th. I retract that.
Well, let's see if I get a seconder to that before we make it. Okay, Mayor Bailey seconds that, and we've shot down John's first foray into the discussion on the amendment. Are there any other comments to the amendment? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I read it correctly, council meeting 4th Tuesday, planning advisory 1st Tuesday. As it's written here, policy development is 2nd Monday, and the administration operations is 3rd Monday. So there's 2 Tuesdays, 2 Mondays.
The resolution is that all committee meetings be the Tuesday of the week at 6 o'clock, I believe so. With planning, I think it's either administration or policy, and then council the 4th. So I'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that is going to be in the bylaw, or if the recommendation as amended passes.
Can I make an amendment that we have rotating chairs and vice chairs a period of 1 year? Can I move, I'm asking this, can I move that the vice chair become chair the next year? Or is that not necessary?
You can move it if that's.
Is that allowed by our procedural bylaw? I'd like to move that then.
Our procedural bylaw right now states that you cannot chair more than one committee, and you cannot be a vice chair if you, more than once. So basically, you have to split them that way. There's nothing saying that a chairman can't be the chairman 10 years or 1 year or whatever, and the vice chairman is elected annually.
So I would like to move an amendment that we have a 1 year term for vice chair, or sorry, for chair and also vice chair, and that vice chair become chair the next year to provide some stability and coaching and things like that on all these committees.
And that would become part of the procedural bylaw. Do I have a seconder for that? John. Discussion to that? John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the, on these Tuesday meetings of the third month, but I agree with the 1 year turnover on it, but I don't think it's necessary for essentially the vice chair to become chair, in the sense that if everybody's at these meetings, then everybody's at least chaired and vice chaired another committee, so to speak. So I would just ask the mover, is he firm on that?
What I will do, John, is separate that into two.
Is the mover okay with that amendment on that? Because I agree with the yearly turnover. I just don't think it's necessary for it may happen, but I don't think it's necessary that has to happen.
Any comments? I'll call the question then. First, on 1 year term of the chair. All those in favor? Opposed? Second, that the vice chair be succeed to the chair after his term as vice chair. All those in favor of that? Opposed? Okay. Then I think that can be phrased, if this recommendation passes into the procedural bylaw, it's going to be amendment. Are there any other amendments? Okay. I'm going to ask the clerk. Go ahead, Joan.
Sorry, and just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, the decisions being made tonight are specifically on the 4 committees that are listed here.
I would say specifically on the 3 committees.
3 committees? Well, I mean, we have people on paramedics that could.
Okay, well, the paramedic is not
Yeah.
handled by the 4th Tuesday of whatever, that's in its own little.
But if somebody from the county was chair of paramedics, then they wouldn't be chair of one of these others, or vice chair.
Okay, that clarification, to clarify, I believe the amendment would carry forward for the 4.
Yeah, that's what I want
Where applicable.
to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we have the recommendation. I believe the changes have been that all meetings are Tuesday, 6 o'clock, with the various Tuesdays. That the chair be a 1 year appointment, not to be repeated. That the building division report through the planning advisory committee. Anything else? That was it? Did we miss any? Okay, I'll call the question. That has been moved and seconded as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. What will happen from here is a bylaw will be prepared. That will be an amendment to the procedural bylaw, and we can have a kick at the cat at at that point as we go on. My question would be, when will this commence? Is that in the, that's not actually in the recommendation, is it? Effective March 1st, that is in the recommendation. Any postmortems on that recommendation, Joan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it said March in here sometime.
It does, it's in the
But
recommendation.
my question would be, right now, we have a curfew of 10 o'clock, and we start at 6 o'clock, and we have a curfew of 11 o'clock if we start at 7. Well, 7, we don't have to worry
I
about it.
believe, not to be argumentative, and I can check this, but the procedural bylaw says that the meetings must end by 10 o'clock across the board. That hasn't been changed. Whatever's in the procedural bylaw now will continue. This recommendation did not change that.
Yeah, and I realize that, and my question was going to be, because we're meeting at 6 and we have that large committee now, and we don't finish, are we going to go past 10, or are we going to
It will be
schedule
the
a
same as
second
what,
meeting?
if this meeting went to 10 o'clock, it would be at the discretion of the committee to change, go beyond the hour. That's not changed.
Okay,
Nothing has changed with that regard.
that's fine.
Mayor David.
Thank you.
So the chairs of all the committees that are in place now will get rid of the elections coming up, and everyone will stay in place until March. Is that right?
I believe.
Why would we change from
Okay.
2 months?
Maybe a recommendation to that effect would be in order, because technically, according to our procedural bylaw, this would be the last meeting. Do you want to make that a motion that the
Well,
present
I
committee
don't-
structure as composed present be continued until the changes are in
I would
place?
think that would make sense. So
I
I'll
think
make
it
the
would too.
motion. Yeah.
Moved by Brian, seconded by Mayor David. Basically that we continue on as we have been with no changes until the big day in March. All those in favor? That motion carries unanimously. Anything else before I move on? That is a very key recommendation that will be going to council, and it changes a lot of things, and I think council is moving in the right direction. Matters referred by council, nothing. Other business, Joan, I didn't forget, you have something.
There's been a lot of talk about photo radar, and Councillor Pearson and I got an email about it from Inspector Anderson, and other municipalities are slowly adopting photo radar in their communities. I think I just heard from another councillor, Hamilton is going to be doing it. The legislation isn't, I haven't seen any legislation, but I'm wondering, since we have our Brant Safe Streets strategy, and it falls under this committee currently, whether the committee is interested in looking at, I mean, I've heard of other councillors mention a photo radar. It was mentioned last term of council. If we're interested in looking at the costs and what would have to happen to have photo radar, and could it be mobile and moved around in various areas of problem areas of the county? So that was what I wanted to bring up tonight under other business.
Would you like to make a motion that a staff be requested to provide information to council or committee, whenever it comes in March or beyond, on photo radar?
Yes.
Is that a consensus? I think everybody is nodding. A report will be forthcoming. I don't know when or where, what committee, or whether it, I'll leave that to staff, but it will be coming somewhere, sometime.
In the future.
In the future, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor David, and then John. Okay, go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Chair, if it's okay, I'll forward the email that Joan's talking about through to Heather, and that way she's got that for information.
Okay.
And I was just wondering if it was too late, Heather, for you to make a speak to the Minister of Transportation at the convention on this matter? Can I speak to the minister?
For Roma, it's too late for me to put a delegation request, but we will be in January looking at Okra,
Okay.
Good Roads delegations.
I think we might be with the Ministry of Transportation at SCORE.
I think.
So if we are, then it'll be covered, but I'll check with SCORE.
Okay, other business, Mark? I know this wasn't pre-announced, but.
No, that's okay. It's on
the
this.
standard. Go ahead.
So also, John Bell and I have already been in contact with a few London councillors who've been doing, they have 2 different resolutions at 2 different stages of this, so we can forward that to the appropriate staff as well.
John?
Well, I was going to comment on that photo radar situation. I thought that should have been referred to Police Services Board. Police Services, that would be police service.
It has been suggested that it be a report from
Now I
council.
understand. I'm too,
Okay, that issue is done. A report will be forthcoming. We'll resurrect it wherever it surfaces. And we are now at the point where we wish to go in camera, if so be it. Could I have a motion to move in camera? Brian, seconded by Steve. All those in favor? Motion's carried. And my voice is just about shot, so David is going to be the